this is in continuation to the earlier part 1, in which I spoke about how to generate features and how to make that feature selection, and how you are going to use these machine learning approaches for dealing with high dimensional genome data analysis. This will be now I am going to talk about the part 2, which will be covered mostly on the application aspects. So, once you heard about this machine learning approaches, how we are going to apply these methods, in which field we are applying, those domains I will be talking about. So, as you may be aware that recently this big data has come in a very big way, but before to that, where this big data stands, let us understand a bit about it. So, on the one hand, we have got statistics at the base level, in which this knowledge of statistics is highly essential, because all your base level modeling, data interpretation, results interpretation, everything modeling, every aspect will be coming from the statistics. Then, as I mentioned, when we do not have much theory, that means data is large, theory is less, little theory is available, then we have to go with the machine learning approaches. So, these two together we put under like a big branch of science called as data science, and data science together with artificial intelligence, covering these two will be your big data. So, big data analytics covers the entire gamut of all these analytics, which consists of your statistics, machine learning and AI based methods. So, the processes involved are like learning, learning is nothing but rules, reasoning, self correction, learning rules, reasoning and self correction will be there and in all the processes. Whereas, on the other hand, if you look at it here, like predictive causal analytics, predictive analytics and machine learning for making predictions and machine learning for pattern discovery, these will be dealt under different segments what I have mentioned here. Again, at broad level you can have human sciences, on the other side agricultural sciences, because we talk about health sector here, and here the food grain production and everything we talk about in this field of agriculture. So, here we talk like in human sciences, we call it as bench side to bedside. That means, bench side research work must reach to bedside clinical trials, right. Similarly, in case of agriculture, we talk about land to lab, lab to land, that is lab level, whatever we are investigating, whatever our findings are there, they must reach to our stakeholders who are the farmers who are working in the field at land level. So, these two together we put under this biological sciences broadly, and then above this, if you go with the genome sciences, every plant, animal, fish, microbe, insect, there are number of organisms are there, evolutionary process, we got so many changes occurring at their genome level, taking that into account, evolutionary aspects on one side, and on the other side you have got something like, if I say quote an example like anoxia, that is oxygen, low oxygen content. If you have that, there is a particular stress, if you see submergence 1A gene is responsible, like which helps in the rice plants, even in submergence conditions they can tolerate this stress. Same thing, if you go inside the the animals or the animal species, fish species which are present in the ocean, or you can see in different water bodies, they are less water content, but still they alive. Is there any common genes they are governing, or the genes which are present in plant, in rice, versus what these submergence gene present in anoxia stress related genes they are present in the fish? Is there any correspondence or any changes or any similarities are there? So, these will be like investigations which one will be interested to know, that we cover under these genome sciences. So, if you take biological sciences, genome sciences and data sciences together in this hierarchy, maybe we are in a position to explain the complex phenomena involved in biological sciences. Maybe we can unravel some underlying mechanisms present in the biological phenomena. So, that is I talked in general the data science I mentioned, big data I just little bit I mentioned. So, if you look at it, data could be, you know, when it becomes very large, as in the part 1 I explained that when you go with the different genomes, their sequences, different platforms, you come across large amount of enormous amount of sequence data information, either in form of nucleotides or in the form of protein sequences. So, the volume of data is high, that means high volume, and velocity is also high, that means the velocity with which the data flow from say public domain resources to our lab side investigations, isn't it? You sit at this place at your bench, workbench you can sit, and you are downloading gigabytes data from NCBI. Suppose you do not have very good internet connectivity, or the velocity with the hardware and software, the hardware support is not there, then how this data can be flow from public domain resources to your system. So, if the velocity of data is very high, then also we talk about big data. So, what you are seeing here is high volume, high velocity and high variety of data. Some data may be in textual, some may be in numerical, something may be, you know, in Oracle database it may be there, something may be maintained in Excel or some other like different platforms you are storing data, different resources data is available in different forms. Then variety of the information you are having, data you are having, how to deal with this, that also comes under your big data, and how authentic it is, how high veracity, and added by this value your data is very valuable. So, that also comes under big data, you know, which covers 5 V's, that is volume, velocity, variety, veracity and value. Actually there are 4 only, then value could be added, and then this is something called as complexity. So, it will not be visible just like that if you look at the data, right. There it may be a small data set, but highly complex in nature. For example, you take a protein sequence, it could be of length 300 amino acid residues or 400 amino acid residues. How much space you require? Very small data set, very small data, one file, one protein sequence file. But you look at the complexity it may be having, it may have like this protein interacts with which other proteins in your cytoplasm, or what are the protein-protein interactions, what is the function, you know, it is regulating, or how it is being expressed, at what level, at which tissue, at which stage it is being expressed. So, a single protein is very small, you know, data, but large amount of complexity may be present. How this protein plays a role in genetic networks, regulatory networks, we do not know, like, you know, we have to explore. So, such complexity involvement may be there in small data sets. So, big data does not mean that it should be voluminous. A big data could be very small data, but having high complexity. So, this is what I would like to emphasize on this big data. And then data can come from biomedical research, or data can also come from phenomics, and also you can get data from genomics. So, any of these fields you are getting, but the data which you get is highly voluminous, you know, satisfying all the properties, highly complex may be there, we need to understand with the help of this data analysis, high dimensional genome data analysis. Okay. So, earlier like from raw data you will be getting, so when you get sequence reads you will get only, you know, like small length of reads you will be getting. So, from sequence reads you need to reach to genome assembly, then followed by genome annotation, then pathway analysis. So many number of, you know, large number of analytical steps are there, but at base level you will be getting raw data. Okay. So, this raw data needs processing, like quality checks you need to find out, you know, make like Phred score. These scores will be computed based on which you can judge the quality of the reads what you are getting. That means the curation is required, data set should be cleaned. After that comes this data analysis and algorithms. This is very important steps for which you people are, you know, like all the participants of this training program, you are present here to do this data analysis. So, when we conduct the practical session, practical exercises, you will be dealing all this data analysis using R software. And then I will talk little bit about algorithms in the coming slides, but then about this, when you cannot deal with if the data sets are small, it will be good, but if they are like large data sets, then you need to take the help of machine learning. Predictions are also to be dealt with. Similarly, once you get the results and all, data visualization, interaction and communication, they are very important. Say I give you 1000 observations, you see it in a Excel table or Excel worksheet, you may not able to understand what patterns, what variations are present in that, but the same data you put it in a graphical form, you will easily understand, yes, this is the variation present. So, that visualization is important. For example, rice has got 12 chromosomes. If I will give 12 chromosomes, length of each chromosome, like in terms of how many base pairs are there, even if you see the 12 observations, unless you do ascending or descending order, you may not understand which chromosome is the longest one and which is the shortest one. This is a small one I am telling you, but if you represent these 12 chromosomes on a computer screen, which says that if the chromosome length will be, each chromosome will be represented as a rectangular bar. So, so that visualization will easily tell, okay, look at this chromosome number, X chromosome number like 7 or 6 are there will be the shortest chromosomes than other chromosomes. So, you can visualize it, no need to do any further like ascending descending order. And again visualization, like if I will say on rice genome chromosome number 1 from position, genomic position say 57235 to some some other region, this particular gene is lying. So, in the tabular form, all the genomic coordinates you have to look, all the gene IDs, gene functions, everything you have to capture. How much you can capture it, but if the same thing you do through visualization tools, you represent these chromosomes as different rectangular bars, like we call them as genome browsers. So, if you put on genome browsers, just take the mouse over sorry, you just move the mouse, easily you can see what genes present there, further details you need, or you can zoom in and zoom out, you can do that, and what are the functionality there, how many SNPs are present, all these are possible in different visualization tools. So, you need to write scripts and programs for making the visualization. So, any big amount of data you can represent it on a single screen with the help of data visualization tools. So, then finally, what is that we are making? We are doing this decision making. So, in case of classification, in case of binary classification, you can say this is stress responsible or stress tolerant or stress susceptible. So, like these genes are you can classify, like that all classifications based on which you can make the decision making. So, final step is like decision making. So, what is that now? Whatever we are learning or doing or research we are performing, all that must be translated to the stakeholder level. So, this we call it as translational research. So, it is also nowadays it is coming in a very big way. So, learning is whole time lifetime process, doing is research and training through which we do the things, and then reaching is like to farmers level or the stakeholder level we have to reach. And this side I mentioned, this is the lab level, this is land level, all the things whatever, even if the postgraduate students, they are capturing whatever from this talk or what they are learning from trainings and all. Ultimately, when you will become researchers or teachers in state universities and all, that has to be again further taken to the further students, translation, keep going doing that. So, it is like a snowball effect. So, every training, every research program has a snowball effect on the ultimate beneficiaries, who are nothing but our farmers. Okay. So, in the whole process of, you call it as data science or you call it as AI, further AI can be downstream into this machine learning further downstream to this the deep learning, whatever you do, all this at the back end for performing all these aspects, at the back end you need to understand what is called as an algorithm. So, if you have a process that must be, you know, you need to have an algorithm based on which you need to write a program which will be executed, and then your data analysis will be done. So, this algorithm is very big and important aspect in any analytics. Okay. Just see this algorithm how you are defining it. It should have an input, it should give some output, and there must be some definiteness, that is definite steps must be involved in it, and effectiveness. So, I run an algorithm and say that it takes 3 months time, 6 months time, what algorithm I have written. So, I need to write effective algorithms in such a pattern. You need to write them so that results will come in a time bound manner, and there must be some termination. Termination means it should terminate, the steps should terminate finally, otherwise it will say keep on running, you say that core dump or memory issues, some other problems will come, then that is not an algorithm. So, these are the characteristic features of algorithms. On the other hand, if you define it properly, it is a sequence of definite and effective instructions which terminates with the production of correct output from a given input. So, that is how the algorithm is defined. So, when I say it is definiteness or effectiveness, there must be some measures which will tell you whether an algorithm is effective or not. That is we call it as the complexity. So, complexity not only biological phenomena, complexity is also involved in your algorithmic research. So, algorithms complexity refers to the rate at which the required storage or consumed time grows with the function of the problem size. So, simple example I will just say. So, all of you might have used this BLAST, isn't it. So, there is a box for query sequences, and at the back end you have got subject sequence, normally some database we will take, either it could be plant related or NR database, or if you want to specify a particular organism, if you are aware of, you can put that at back end. So, you give 100 sequences, you blast it against the database, you will get the result in say x amount of seconds. Now, instead of 100 query sequences, if I increase it to 10,000 or 20,000 or 1 lakh sequences, like 100,000 sequences, if I put in query box, you query, I use them sequences as query sequences, how much time it will take? We expect that for 100 sequences, if it has taken 1 minute, then 1000 sequences it should take 10 minutes, and 10,000 sequences it should take 100 minutes. But really when you run this program, the time consumption may not be exactly same, it will be much higher than what we are expecting. That means, time is growing like exponential way with respect to the size of the problem. Here the size of the problem is number of sequences, how many you are taking. The number of sequences are increasing, it is not proportionately or through a multiplication it is increasing time, it will go in an exponential way. So, there are certain limitations, then we say that algorithms should be designed in such a pattern that the time complexity should be reduced, right. Second aspect, space complexity. So, we are running certain genome assembly program, suppose we have got like students, we are having desktop PCs, or we have got very powerful notebook or laptops. It has certain limitations like RAM could be 8 GB or 64 GB or 128 GB, that much RAM is there, but the storage is also limited, 500 GB disk may be there, disk space may be there, internal disk. Now, with these two things, if I run the assembly program, what happens while performing the assembly, it throws certain output which will be stored in the your storage, but if it exceeds the capacity of the storage, it will stop. That is why we are going for the high computing power and also going with hardware and the storage with high capacity. So, the point is the storage, the space is the space complexity. Your algorithm should be in such a pattern that your space complexity should be low, time complexity should also be low. How best it is possible? It may not be always possible to come across with this. So, your algorithm should be designed to strike a balance between these two and go with an optimal solution. Okay. So, the complexity depends on what machine you are using to execute the program, also the compilers to construct the program. These two are important aspects. That is what I mentioned, trade off between space and time complexity is required, trade off between some optimal, some balancing is required. If space complexity is high, time complexity may be low. If time complexity is high, space complexity may be low. They are inversely suppose proportional. Then what will happen? So, we have to make a trade off, some sacrifice we have to do with these two. So, the what you call asymptotic analysis we call it as. So, there are three types of asymptotic analysis is possible. One is theta notation, another is big O notation and omega notation, like we call it as omega notation, lower bound, and big O notation, upper bound, that is maximum time which algorithm, say it takes how much worst case situation or maximum time how much it takes, or the algorithm or the program which compute, which takes lowest amount of time. And similarly, a range of amount of time also you can get. The complexity can be analyzed with the help of this asymptotic analysis using three types of notations, that is theta, big O and omega notations. So, this I already mentioned, memory utilization, disk usage and network usage, bandwidth, that is essential. Some public domain NCBI you are downloading large amount of data, if your bandwidth does not support, your cable does not support, or the network what you are connected with is not supporting, then you may not able to perform the analysis. There is something called as complexity ladder. So, say I say I is equal to 1, say I assign that to start with some initial value, say the value of this item is say 500 rupees. So, this is the initial step, some assignment of value to it. This is called constant time or single assignment value. So, what happens, this is like this is independent of size of the problem. Another one is called logarithmic way of increasing, that is searching and all. So, in databases when we make, we need to say, you say that gene ID accession number is so and so accession number, you want to get the whole record, GenBank record from NCBI. So, how this is, the searching problem, this is like different types of searches are there, searching problems are there. So, logarithmic scale computing will be, complexity will be there for, especially for binary search and all those searches will be there. Then comes the looping. So, I wrote a piece of code and this should be executed 1000 number of times. So, this we call it as looping. So, I say those who are in computer science, they either for loop or do loop, something we do, that is for those looping, it is a linear growth of complexity. Similarly, merging and sorting you get, that is n log n growth. Likewise, different other complexity ladder it is there. Only the most time consuming or most complexity involvement is there in the factorial type of problems, factorial growth. Then coming to this, there are machine learning. Just I quote this algorithms, techniques and models broadly in 4 categories you can put. First one is statistical modeling paradigm, you can say the data model, algorithmic model or machine learning at one place. Other one is machine learning algorithms like supervised learning, unsupervised learning, reinforcement learning. So, unsupervised, where you do not have to have any idea about the total number of groups or populations defined, means a priori information is not needed, but supervised learning you require this information. Then these techniques are like feature learning, sparse dictionary learning, decision trees and association rules are required in this machine learning techniques. My colleague will be taking classes on this machine learning techniques, where you will understand this, what are the differences and what type of, like you say cluster analysis, that is unsupervised learning, but you say that something like discriminant analysis, or you say that SVM, ANN, all those are the supervised learning methods that will come. So, what are these models present in this machine learning? Say AN9, artificial neural networks, support vector machine, Bayesian and genetic algorithms, random forest, all these are different models. That is what I put under this machine learning. Now, coming to the agri-genomics domain. So, where these machine learning algorithms, these are useful in agri-genomics. So, but here you see reinforcement is something like it involves Markov decision process, we call it as MDP. So, these algorithms, different types of classified as supervised, unsupervised and reinforcement machine learning algorithms, they have got lot of applications. At this center we have done little bit of work which I would like to share through these applications, like herbicide resistant genes, identification of herbicide resistant genes, nitrogen fixation genes and heat shock proteins, splicing phenomena that morning I explained, like identification of core and mini core, then DNA barcoding for especially for taxonomic classification we use that, and then non-coding RNAs and endogenous target mimics identification. These, what I am saying is, these machine learning techniques have been applied to go with this research work on ncRNA and ETM identification. Therapeutics and foot and mouth disease in cattle, prediction of small RNAs, discrimination of coding regions from non-coding, which is required for genes, gene structure and all, then genomics assisted breeding, then crops, animals, fish, microbes and traits, and NGS hybrid genome assembly for all these species. Nowadays these different resources, platforms, sequencing they are coming. So, you require what we call it as hybrid genome assembly. I will just show one or two applications and then I will stop this one. Most important applications I will just explain. Morning I explained the feature generations. So, feature generation is there in this. If you look at the support vector machine classifiers, there are different types of functions, object functions are there, maybe like linear kernel, polynomial kernel of degree D, and radial basis functions, RBF kernels, sigmoid kernels. These are like internal algorithm based backend, they are involved in this machine learning techniques. Then if you look at this, these are like, as our program is analyzing high dimensional genome data by R and open source tools, there are certain packages written in, they are available in R, which we may be using in practical session, like KNN, bagging, then naive Bayes, random forest, then you have got for different R packages meant for all these things. Okay. Now, once you fit the model or any say I will just say like you have got a data set. First of all, we need to train the available models or new models you want to go for, you need to train the data. So, the data which is present, the total number of observations what you have, you bifurcate them into two parts. One we call it as for training, another is for testing. Okay. In the training part, you take, suppose there are certain I quote the same example what I explained in part 1, there are certain splice sets which are true, but which you are predicting them as false. There may be some splice sets which may be false, but you are predicting them as true. So, these possibilities are there, but in reality your model should precisely identify true ones as true ones and false ones as false ones, right. So, the whole data set you need to bifurcate into, say 80% of the data will be used for training the models, and then 20% maybe you keep it for testing. And then you should have one more data set which we call it as independent test data sets, like gold data sets we call it as, which are experimentally validated and proven data sets, means things are known in that data set. So, the models will be developed or based on the certain parameters called sensitivity and specificity, which will be plotted as in this pattern. If this curve goes exactly touching these two corners, then the area under the curve will be 1. That means your prediction accuracy is very, very high, right. The models which you have used for predicting the stress tolerance genes as stress tolerant genes and stress susceptible genes as stress susceptible genes. This classification using the model what you have predicted is highly accurate when this ROC curve goes like this. So, like here you see different amino acid composition, CTD, different types of features you have used. Every feature you have used, you train the model and you tested it, based on the prediction accuracy you are drawing curves. So, in this you say that which one will be the best one. So, that one which touches at the top of this two corners, that will be the best prediction model using this particular feature. So, likewise these will be plotted for prediction purposes. And so, these are several applications. So, now one thing is important, like when you develop a prediction technique or prediction model, this should be translated. That means, it should be used by the biologists. Say that means, you have developed a prediction based methodology, it is in your laboratory it is present, or in your institute it is present, but you are not sharing that with public. So, then you are not dealing with data analysis or high dimensional genome data analysis or bioinformatics. You are just developed and you are keeping it with you. No. So, you should share it on public domain with everybody, so that resources should be optimally utilized and nobody should repeat the things. Okay. That means, if for example, in this case a web server for prediction of nitrogen fixation genes. So, you take the genes, there are different types of 6 classifications are there in this. NIF proteins are present like NIFH, NIFD, NIFK, NIFE, N and B type. These are 6 types are there. First of all, I need to understand whether it is nitrogen fixing gene or not. If it is nitrogen fixing gene, then you need to further classify it into 6 different categories. So, my prediction server what I have developed based on say SVM or random forest or whatever machine learning techniques I have done, that must be allowed to the common user, so that they can give the sequence and identify whether it is a nitrogen fixation gene or not. If it is so, then which type of it is, which type of, like whether it is NIFK or NIFE or whatever gene it has to classify and identify that. Similarly, we have also developed servers, web servers for classification of these heat shock proteins. These are different methods. What I am trying to say is these are developed and shared on the public domain, and slowly when we go with the practicals, each one server will be used and demonstrated to you. They are available at online. This is another important aspect which I would like to discuss, like this is called hybrid genome assembly. Morning I was talking about short read assembly, long read assembly and narrow pore sequencing also you are getting. There are certain algorithms meant for each type of assembly. Like short read assembly, you have got overlap consensus, OLC, de Bruijn graph and Borrow-Wheeler transformation. These are different methods falling under short read assembly, and apart from that Bowtie2 and this Kusawa2, they are also available for long read assembly. And there are certain compression algorithms. I talked about space complexity, isn't it? While performing genome assembly, lot of memory and storage will be occupied. So, suppose it throws something which will be put in a compressed form. Right now, that is not required by the program, but you just put it in a compressed form. As and when required by the program, you decompress it and take that. So, such compression algorithms also you need to have. Like these are the different Huffman coding and arithmetic coding, they are available for compression algorithms. Now, what are the hybrid algorithms? If I want to combine short reads with long reads, there are certain merits and demerits. Short reads, there you may find gaps. Long reads, you may come across with certain sequencing errors. Now, these two are to be hybridized, so that you can improvise your genome assembly. Yes. So, that is possible with these hybrid genome assembly algorithms like Jabba, Lordec, HMAP and these are the algorithms there. And then now comes, even if hybrid assembly algorithms are present to combine, still time taken will be more. So, can we parallelly, can we bifurcate the algorithm, the whatever steps present in the algorithm, can we look at some of the steps which can be done parallelly? Then in that case, for every parallel process you get the result and you combine it, that will be faster. So, we call that as parallelization of hybrid genome assembly. So, this comes under the parallelization, this comes under the concept of big data. So, big data based assembly, they are now coming out, but these assembly algorithms include blast reduce, cloud burst, crossbow, spark, contrail, these are there. But now the question is, these big data based assembly algorithms right now may not be parallel. So, if you can use hybridization, parallelization, compression and use the big data concepts, if you can come out with this, then the assembly programs which you are waiting for months, they may be reduced to smaller amount of time, right. So, the applications are again in this whole algorithmic research, you need to take care of high dimensional analysis part into account. So, I just that is how you can devise with the new algorithms. There is another thing called, you might be aware of, BLAST2Go, which is used for which is used after making the genome assembly, that is meant for genome annotation. So, in this there are two aspects are very important. One aspect, if you look at here this side, it involves BLAST and then mapping and annotation. Then it goes to the all other further downstream analysis for gene ontology and Keck pathway analysis, all will come here. But this step whatever, so parallelization of this entire thing may not be possible, but you can do that parallelization at this BLAST level. So, BLAST algorithm, it has got certain steps where you can make the parallelization. So, we call it as parallel BLAST, or you can MPI BLAST, we call it as message passing information. So, this is MPI BLAST is also possible, through which the amount of time taken for this BLAST step can be drastically reduced. Another way is, if you put it online BLAST2Go and compute this BLAST as well as gene ontology, if you perform these two things, it may take long time. So, what we have? We have got offline BLAST. So, take that and just analyze it, BLAST, you perform it and generate the code in results in terms of XML files, .xml files, you generate them, and this XML file can be further given to BLAST2Go for annotation purpose. So, that step could reduce large amount of time in this entire process of parallelization of BLAST2Go. So, I am just looking at important steps which you can know. Okay. So, there is one thing called, so why I am not telling applications in detail, because you need to do them, So, that is why the only theory behind it little bit I will express now, because this overview I am talking about high dimensional genome data analysis. So, something you see here, what is called as AI has come, machine learning has come, deep learning has come. Small little bit about AI, this is nothing but ability of a computer program or machine to think and learn and make computers smart. So, that is the very general definition of artificial intelligence. So, there are certain cognitive functions, the cognitive functions are there which are associated with the human minds by the human beings. So, that is the real intelligence. So, what happens, some problem comes, you will solve it, something you will look at, that is how we learning from our childhood to till now and keep on learning. So, learning process and problem solving, these two are highly associated by the cognitive functions in our human minds, which we call it as human intelligence, real intelligence. But what happens if the problem gets what you call as very big problem or complex problem, and you may not able to learn anything from the huge amount of data sets, that means your real intelligence is there, but to some extent you know like you will be constrained by using that intelligence when the things get like data becomes too large. So, these real intelligence processes, if you can inculcate inside the machines, and if your machines can perform this mimic the intelligence what you are talking about real intelligence, that becomes your artificial intelligence. Clear? Because that is being done by a computer, a machine which does this learning and problem solving things it will do, and you will get the results. Whereas, machine learning on the other hand, you give machines access to data and let them learn for themselves. And the deep learning is like based on learning data representations as opposed to task specific algorithms. Like there will be like like when you do machine learning, deep learning, it is like learning data representations. Task specific you can do that easily by the machine learning, but these will be much more general and deeper in sense. There are like deep learning methods like deep neural networks, and then DBN we call it as deep belief networks, and recurrent neural networks. These are different types of methods available under deep learning. So, you just imagine like there are multiple steps which are involved in that, say black box morning I was talking about. I said input output one black box, there are limited number of things can happen in that, but now deep learning what they say is every layer's output will be input to the other layer. Like that it will be n number of layers will be there, these all will be packed like inside the hidden one. So, that will help you in classifying in predicting the output for a given input. Okay. So, each level, that is what it says, each level learns to transform its input data into a slightly more abstract and composite representation. Each level, each layer will be learning and learning, right. That is how the deep learnings becomes very precise. But remember things which can be done with the help of machine learning always need not be go with the deep learning. There is a requirement, if machine learning fails, then I suppose that the deep learning should be taken care of. Suppose for example, you are having 27 features or 30 features or 35 100 variables are there, right. So, if your ML fails, then you can go with the deep learning method. So, there are certain applications and pipelines are there where you can use this under metagenomics. Under metagenomic study, this deep learning has been used. So, like antibiotic resistant genes they identify using deep ARGSS and deep ARGLS, and where they have used Python and R scripts. This is the metagenomic steps. We will talk about detail later on. Okay, GWAS I will tell. Okay, this is related to genome wide association study, GWAS. What that the GWAS does, this aims to discover genetic factors underlying these phenotypic traits, means association of your variants to these traits. Large number of genetic factors poses both computational and statistical challenges, but different methods have been, computational approaches have been developed to carry out this large scale GWAS. But there are certain challenges, issues are also there that need to be addressed. Let us see that how best we can do. Then scalability is the most GWAS sets, data sets consists of large number of SNPs. Therefore, algorithms for GWAS need to be highly scalable, means when the problem size gets increased, they should able to handle it. If you use for say for example, like small organisms GWAS you have done, it should be scalable, the methodology should be scalable to large genomes also. So, for example, if you take this is these are SNPs are arranged as rows and samples are arranged as columns, and each sample for a given locus it could be either, do not go by this is not SNP I mentioned, like they are like A, AB and B I just mentioned. Otherwise, SNP could be like A/T or G/C or something. So, if it is suppose A/T means biallelic A and T, the genotype could be AA or AT or TT. So, now you have to see which is the major allele and which is the minor allele. So, you go for coding all these major allele based in every SNP. For every SNP at this particular sample, for each SNP on in all the samples, if you are taking this major allele, number of major alleles present in the genotype. So, if A is the major allele, T is the minor allele, if the genotype identified for this sample is AA, then it will be coded as 2, because 2 major alleles which are of A type present in that genotype. So, it will be coded as 2. Suppose you got for sample 2, it is AT, suppose AT means only one major allele is present. So, you code that as 1. Suppose the genotype corresponding to this, as far as this locus SNP is concerned, it is say TT, that means there are no major alleles present. So, you code that as 0. This procedure you need to follow for all the samples, for all the SNPs you need to code it. Once your coding is done, and now this is need to be converted to a sort of quantification is required, where the estimated allele dosage of any one allele can be computed as, because it has got 2 major alleles, you give weightage 2 and 1 major allele 1, 0 major allele. So, you give 0 weightage. So, this score has to be, dosage has to be computed, and for every sample, for every SNP, the cross section here you get this particular estimated allele doses. Once this data is ready, say here I say that 2541 samples means individuals or subjects or anything you can take, number of subjects, individuals, and here for each sample in the whole genome, on the whole genome, suppose you are going by the 50K SNP chip or 90K SNP chip in case of rice, that means these 90,000 SNPs will be here, and the samples could be 500 or 200, or it depends how much money you have got and how much data sequence you have generated. So, based on that, when you get this whole matrix, then the analytics will come, analysis will come. Okay. Along with this, you need to have the phenotypic data information also. Say you look at this yield response of 500 genotypes you are having, lines, 500 lines, yield or oil content or anything you are having Y response, and that means 500 rows are there. For each row, phenotypic trait performance I know it, and the genotypic information also I know it. That means, for this line, the SNPs means the genotyping data I got, where I have coded already 0, 1, 2 pattern, I got this full matrix. Genotypic data right hand side, and left hand side you put the trait response. Now, you need to find out what are the, through certain models you need to find out what are those SNPs which are actually associated with the trait expression or trait variation. So, that we perform under this particular genomic prediction or genomic selection. There is small difference. Genomic prediction means it is risk, like risk assessment. You say that prediction comes with binary response, like it is either disease is there or not there, means disease risk prediction, suppose I call it as. So, it after that, after making the model, it will predict it that an individual is prone to exhibiting the disease or not, or a patient is a cancerous patient or not cancerous patient, normal patient. So, like this binary classification, that prediction is possible, and this genomic selection and all based on the quantitative traits or the breeding value you can predict for each individual based on your SNP level information. Okay. So, this is a small example where this 29,619 curated SNPs, skewed SNPs genotyped across a panel of 240 maize inbred lines that has been taken, and then at different locations you have to repeat this. The experiment has been repeated at IRI, Angravu and RRS Karimnagar. These places this has been replicated, experiment conducted, and these agronomic traits it has measured like ASI, grain yield, number of kernels per row, and all these phenotypic traits have been measured. This at one hand. On the other side, you have got for these 240 lines, Maize inbred lines, you got 29619 SNPs information you are having. So, what are the models? The modeling comes here, statistical models. There could be, you can apply ridge regression, lasso, elastic net, base A, base B, base C, base C pi, many models are there. Then RKHS is there, random forest regression based methodology is also there. So, these topics in detail over the training program we will be covering. So, but just as an overview I am just sharing that these models have been applied to identify the prediction accuracies, to get the prediction accuracies of the breeding values. How best these models can be fitted, so that for a genotype, means for a new individual whose phenotypic response you are not aware, but you have got at very young stage or seedling stage you got its you got the SNP information, so that you can predict its breeding value, right. Why do we go for genomic selection? When do we go for genomic selection? Say traditional breeding strategies, all your generations, over generations, it takes like 8 years or 9 years time to develop, marker assisted selection or anything you do. Traditional breeding and marker assisted selection also takes time. Vis-a-vis, if you go with genomic selection, I just give an example like late expression of traits in case of coconut plantation and all. You see that the nuts will come like after how many years? Who is from Kerala? So, the coconuts will tree started bearing coconuts around like 6 years, 7 years they start, but for the 7 years whole time you are just rearing that plant, the tree, spending lot of money. Ultimately, you come to know that this is prone to disease, or the size of coconuts will be small, or some traits which are not desirable. Then why do you waste money for the long time? So, at the very young stage, if you take its the SNP information with the help of DNA, then you can predict its breeding value at the initial stage, or trait performance you can predict it. Same pattern for assessing the performance of a sire, you need to wait for its daughter's performance and further their daughter's performance, isn't it? The dam's performance and further the daughter's performance, like 2-3 generations you have to wait for it. That means all the feeding management practices, lot of money you will be spending. But if very young age, if you come to know what is the worth of that animal, breeding worth of the animal, with the help of this SNP information and going by the breeding value prediction, you can easily at the young age itself you can either cull it or you can rear it, both ways it is possible. So, late expression traits and the time scale, if it is taking lot of time, then you have to go by the genomic selection. So, we call it as genetic gain, delta G. It is nothing but I sigma into heritability of the trait. So, in this we are not dividing this right hand quantity by the time. So, if the time is more, automatically your genetic gain gets reduced, but if time is less, use it, then your genetic gain will be very high. So, that is where the genomic selection comes into picture. So, the point of showing this slide is that for different at different locations, they found certain at particular locus this SNP, it is getting associated, it is associated with the trait expression from every location we found this. So, what I do is like future strategy, I just share with you that search for more data scientists is required. They are rare hybrids, because the person who has knowledge on biology, statistics, computer science, such persons will be very hybrid type of persons, rare hybrids. We require data scientists having these qualities. So, my request or my suggestion is that if biologists getting an interest in this computational aspects, they will excel like anything. Same thing, the statisticians or computer scientists develop interest in understanding the biology, or both of you have interactions with each other and go with quick results you require. It's changing time very fast. So, nobody will wait. Today you start, you think somebody else will be implementing it. So, take the help, have interactions and have integration of these disciplines. And development of efficient algorithms in terms of time and space complexity. For example, I said parallelized hybrid genome assembly is need of the hour, and this functional PCA, principal component analysis, functional classification and regression, etc. And these are all required under phenomics studies, because phenomics, if you we have one option to take all the students to phenomics facility, so that you can see how the images are captured. Our intention is in the field level, from a certain distance, if you capture an image, it should tell what is the condition of the crop, what is the estimated the yield you can get. So, that's what, but behind the screen what is required, but behind the screen so many images, large dimensional data is coming. That is why we kept one lecture on phenomics also. So, the data analysis part will be demonstrated to you. And machine learning approaches I talked a bit, and then mining, data mining, you see high speed data streams and mining time, time changing data streams. We call it as VFDT, means certain things are not static, dynamically if they are changing, then immediately the results are to be displayed at the back end doing the high dimensional data analysis. Highly trained manpower is required, high end supercomputers are also required, and for any ultimate aim of your prediction methods is to model it in such a way that should give high prediction accuracy, right, so that it will be implemented at field level. So, with this I would like to acknowledge different funding agencies through which at this center we developed the computational capabilities. I would like to thank the DBT, NAIP, Cabin Scheme, NASF, National Agriculture Science Fund, also certain World Bank funded this NAHEP, where you people are sitting here under came for this training program. Also my mentors, Dr. Mahapatraji, Trilochan Mahapatraji, who is DG ICR now, Dr. BK Thalma of Delhi University, PK Meher, my student and colleague, Tanmay, Sarika, Indra, they are my associates in the projects, and head cabinet director for supporting and giving us all the computational facilities. So, thanks a lot. Thank you so much for your patient hearing. I will stop it here. Oh, it's 2 o'clock.